Joycelyn. Brent.
Here.
Michelle. Here. Rita. Here. Ron.
Here.
Yummy. Here. Michael.
Here.
Lori.
Here.
Noel.
Here.
Susan. Joycelyn.
I'm sorry, Susan's here.
Okay, thank you. Joycelyn. Oh, Joycelyn was on. She dropped off. Okay.
Okay, thank you. We have a quorum.
Cody, could you please notify us when Joycelyn does come back on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I can let you know when she joins again.
Thank you.
The first matter is to approve the agenda. We have a motion.
Second.
Thank you. The moved and second that we approve the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstaining? Okay, it's carried. The next matter is the consent agenda. Approval of the consent agenda, approval of minutes for the last meeting, and the report of expenses. So we have a motion to approve that. Thank you. Second?
Second.
Second. It's been moved and second that we approve the consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? And abstaining, it passed. Preliminary business, recognitions and awards.
Right, so we have two that we want to draw to everyone's attention. And one of them, and I'm not sure if we have a picture of this, but our HR department was recognized in the 2021 Women of Distinction luncheon. They were all, it is an entire female office, so they were all considered women of distinction. There is a photo that's in board docs of them receiving their award. It looks like being awarded by Brad Speaks, it's up to me. And most of this was due to their communication and their activities around the library during COVID-19. We were pivoting, doing all the stuff that we had to do in early 2020. The other award that I want to bring to your attention is the Missouri Library Association Literary Award, which recognizes a Missouri writer or body of work about Missouri. And that was awarded for this, which is Curating Home, a Kansas City poetry anthology, which was done by Woodneath Press. This was in part a Missouri Bicentennial program or project, but it involves poetry about Kansas City for the most part. Both sides of the state line. I believe it was 56 poems and 54 poets, something like that. So copy of this, it's available at Woodneath Press, but I brought in a copy of it if you'd like to run through it as well. But that was, I picked that up at the Missouri Library Association conference on behalf of Woodneath Press earlier this month.
That's great. Congratulations to all. Next matter is the financial reports.
Okay, by the end of September, we have received the total amount of tax revenue for $655,000, which is about $100,000 smaller than last year's number. That's a 13% decrease. All of them are back tax, delinquent tax, and the new tax will come in December.
So Quan, can I pause for just a second on that? And I want to make sure people are comfortable with what he's saying. Although the revenue is coming in slower, traditionally the revenue that we receive at this time of the year is back taxes, delinquent taxes, things like that. So the interpretation is that people's taxes are on time, that we're not receiving as much back taxes, which is why it's slower. Quan and I have talked about this several times. We've talked with county officials. We have, even though it's 13% behind this time last year, there's no reason to be concerned at this point.
Yeah, and also during the reassessment year, more people may dispute with their tax bills. So we could have a bigger delinquent tax in the following year, the non-reassessment year. So, but this year is a reassessment year, so smaller tax. For the total amount of operating revenue, it's $811,000, about 5%, smaller than last year's number. On the expenditure side, the payroll and the benefits is close to $7.5 million, 22% of the budget. Library materials, we spent about $4.5 million, 37% of the budget. All other operational accounts, about $2.1 million, 20% of the budget.
Cody, you need to advance, one more, please.
Page 3, that's a debt service fund. Right in the middle shows the total amount of interest from Bank of Kansas City for $110,286. In fact, we have stopped receiving any interest income from Bank of Kansas City since last year. But the amount of interest revenue from the taxes is still coming. We have received about $3.6 million in total. That's under a 5-year agreement. The amount of disbursement to the library is over $70.7 million, leaving a cash balance about $12.9 million. We have made one interest-only payment this year, and the balance of the debt is about $62.3 million. Page 4, next one is the capital project fund. That's a list of the capital projects budgeted for this year. So far, we spent about $74,121 for Wooney Historical Home, and $9,350 on the Reading Rocket, close to $300,000 on technology storage for the computer data. Also, we spent close to $3.6 million for capital improvement plan so far. Also, during the month, we have completed a land acquisition of Green Hills, and also we made a deposit of $3,000 to the city of Green Valley. Next one is the grants gifts fund. Currently, we have about 28 active grants and projects. So far this year, we received about $43,000 in grant revenue, and we spent about $61,700 on grant expenses, leaving a cash balance close to $410,000. Page 6, that's the health insurance fund. The contributions from the library and the employees is about $918,000, which is about 26% of the budget. The expenses for fixed costs and fees is about $252,000. Medical claims is about $516,800. That's about 17% of the budget, leaving a small surplus, about $149,000. Cash on hand is about little over $1.9 million, and the fund reserve is about $1.6 million, which is a little over the maximum fund reserve required. The last page is the quarterly investment summary. We have 2 investment accounts. The operating investment had about close to $8 million in U.S. government and agencies. Most of them is in short-term investment under 3 months. So the average yield is only 0.09%. Money market, we had about $300,000 there. Average yield is 0.03%. The capital investment, we have about $8.2 million in CDs Average yield is 1.7%. $18.4 million US government and agencies. Average yield is 0.8%. Money market is $148,000, 0.03%. That's my report for the month.
Thank you, Connor. Move on to the old business, unfinished business for the committee reports. And
Joycelyn is on.
Joycelyn, good to see you. You're up.
Okay, thank you. It took me a second to unmute. First item on the agenda for this evening is our DEI audit. Can everyone hear me okay?
Not really. It could be louder.
If I can help.
Okay. I'll try to speak up.
Oh, we got,
Is that
I
better?
turned up the volume. You're better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Staff engaged Hicks Carter Hicks to perform an organizational-wide diversity, equity, and inclusion audit. Now, unlike a financial audit, this kind of report looks to identify areas of success on which to improve, but typically only carries recommendations as opposed to mandates. Part of this effort is tied to the 2021 director's goals, which was stated that the Human Resources Director will review policies and practices to ensure MCPL provides internal opportunities for diversity, equity, and inclusion. In addition, staff has been directed by the board over the course of several strategic plan cycles to consider ways to increase diversity throughout the organization. Consequently, carrying out an audit like this is in line with ongoing direction to staff. Diversity, equity, inclusion is important to an organization like MCPL because staff and public interactions are often relationship-based rather than transactionally based. For the public to be able to see themselves and to relate to the staff they find in the library, helps to assure programmatic success. In addition, staff being able to better relate and understand the customers being served helps the library be more effective. The engagement with Hicks Carter Hicks involves several activities, including an audit of policies and internal practices and procedures. The consultants during our personnel committee meeting presented the audit findings to the personnel committee and will make a similar presentation tonight. Hicks Carter Hicks, thank you for undertaking the step in helping our staff and administration better serve our customers and our employees by providing us some insights through this audit. At this point, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. And we say thank you for engaging our services. We are most appreciative of the ability to be able to do the work for the library. So I'll get to introducing our team. So next slide. I'm Gloria Carter Hicks. I'm the project manager for the DEI audit, but we have two people on our team that are going to introduce themselves, and they were quite involved in gathering data and also analyzing it. Real quickly, my background is HR, organizational development, training, DEI, and strategic planning. And so I've been doing this work for over 30 years, 21 years with our company, Hicks Carter Hicks. I'll turn it over to Dr. Van Groningen to introduce himself.
Thank you, Gloria. My name is Aaron Van Groningen. I was the assistant project manager for this project. I am a senior consultant for Hicks Carter Hicks. My background is in psychology. I have my PhD in industrial organizational psychology from St. Louis University, where some of my focal areas were organizational development and organizational assessment from a DEI lens. So I'll turn it over to Maya to introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Maya Dambocek. I'm the organizational development and training analyst for Hicks Carter Hicks. I also have a background in industrial and organizational psychology with specialties and competencies in diversity, equity, inclusion, organizational development, and training. I also got my master's from St. Louis University. And now I'm going to pass it back over to Gloria.
All right. So on the next slide, we'll give you a brief overview of the methodology that we use to collect quantitative and qualitative data. It's kind of a multifaceted approach, and that's on purpose. We looked at who are your stakeholders internally and externally. We looked at your demographics for the library district as well, who you serve. And so we had a report. We actually did a demographic review of the employees as well. And Maya's going to talk more about that in terms of what we saw around gender, what we saw around salary, and just a number of different things, positions. We look at this raw data and determine where the diversity is within the organization, and also equity as it relates to pay and positions and promotions and all of those things. So Maya will talk more about that. We also looked at your people policies, practices, procedures, and programs. And we identify against something that Maya will talk more about, the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Benchmark. So looking at those policies and seeing how they fare up against best practices. And so that's the other part of the methodology. And then last but not least, we had to talk to people. So we looked at policies and things that are on paper and data, but we also wanted to talk to people. So we did interviews and focus groups in order to be able to gather additional qualitative data. So you're probably more interested in the themes. I'm going to turn it over to Erin to give you an overview of the themes that we found.
Thank you, Gloria. I appreciate it. You can go ahead and move to the next slide, and actually one more past this. Overall, we did 14 interviews with 29 individuals. We did multiple group interviews. So overall, we did 11 interviews with staff at the library. This was typically individuals at higher levels because we wanted to get that 10,000-foot view. And then we also did 3 interviews with external partners with which the library works closely. So I can't highlight all the themes, but here I want to highlight some of the top themes from these internal interviews. The first is that the hiring processes that the library uses contributes to the lack of diversity in branch employees. So those that we spoke to said that there was a desire and a need for staff to more reflect the community being served. And while there is some diversity by virtue of MCPL being a large system covering a large geographical area, the staff is still predominantly homogeneous, mostly white, mostly female. In order to combat this, individuals talked about wanting to revamp some of the processes around hiring, specifically looking at diversifying the applicant pool, ensuring that there was a fair, equitable opportunities for all individuals, and making sure that those making hiring decisions have all the necessary tools and resources to be able to do so. We also heard that the library's DEI values and vision are not necessarily clearly communicated. There's a general understanding from employees based on communication from the library in general, some of the initiatives being done, trainings, even these interviews. But people really wanted to understand what was going on, more broadly speaking, around DEI. And they wanted to make sure DEI was woven through everything the library does. Point number 3, the third major point that was brought up, was that there's a lack of ownership for and consistency of DEI initiatives. People describe DEI initiatives in the past being top down, bottom up, middle out, one of those 3, but not all 3 at the same time. And because of that, there was a number of projects that started, but maybe faltered a little bit. People wanted to make sure that this was consistently done throughout the organization moving forward, and indicated that an internal DEI position within the library would be beneficial to making sure this happened. It was also brought up that communication issues can contribute to lack of DEI progress, that there's sometimes a disconnect between HQ and the individual branches about what are the issues around DEI and how can they be addressed. So people wanted to see more open communication, more transparency, again, going back to the priorities and values, clearly laying those out and figuring out how those are accomplished more broadly. With that being said, people did mention several of the strengths related to the library in terms of DEI, specifically that there was a clear effort to address DEI internally, again, trainings, previous initiatives, things like that. And also people talked about the staff at the library that's full of talented, smart, capable individuals who are attracted to the library because they naturally want to help other people. So this is a great starting point for moving forward with DEI. So you can go ahead and move to the next slide. These are external stakeholder themes. Again, we only did 3 of these because the majority of the focus was the internal aspect of the library. So quickly going through these, external partners indicated that staff is focused on meeting the needs of the patrons, again, speaking to the strength of the staff overall. However, there was a perceived lack of commitment to DEI, mainly because most of these external partners that again work closely with the library weren't sure where the library stood. They hadn't seen any external communication highlighting these priorities or values. And people indicate that staff diversity is increasing, that it is better moving towards reflecting the community being served, but that there's still room to improve in these areas. So the next slide, and you can actually move one more slide too. Focus groups, a little bit different than interviews. This is more focused on individual contributors or individuals at a slightly lower level. Based on the interviews, we wanted to talk to 5 main groups through these focus groups. They were employees who identified as Black or African American, employees who identified as persons of color besides Black or African American, so Latinx individuals, Asian Pacific Islander, Indigenous person, Alaska Native, or those who identified as 2 or more races, white employees, assistant managers, and employees who are members of the LGBTQ+ community. So some of the themes we heard from them largely was that the community that MCPL serves is incredibly diverse. People highlighted that there's a need to understand the community's needs and be able to create programming, have materials, have events that meet these needs. This data needs to be collected and making sure that this is addressed with what the library does. Point number 2 really echoes what we heard from the interviews, that priorities around DEI are not clearly and explicitly stated. Again, there's a general understanding, but people desire those concrete priorities and values, as well as the goals and what action is being taken to accomplish these goals. With that being said, we also heard that a full-time DEI position would be beneficial so that there was specific ownership to make sure that DEI was pushed forward. Point number 3, Trans 101 was highlighted issues around DEI. This was brought up across every focus group again. Employees felt that the response to Trans 101 was difficult for them to deal with because it was based on community needs. There was a feeling that leadership listened to both sides of the issue and that the resolution, both sides ended up being unhappy with the result. Because of some of the stance, people felt that DEI was maybe perceived as being political rather than a human rights issue, which it is. Employees especially felt disappointed because intellectual freedom is a core tenet of the library, but the responses to DEI seem to indicate otherwise. We also heard directly from employees that they felt there was an issue with the board's stance on DEI, that the board appears not to want to focus on DEI and is even somewhat hostile to the concept. The 4th point, BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color, employees, largely felt that they could not be their authentic selves in dealing with or working with their customers and coworkers. They felt that they need to engage in code switching or hide aspects of themselves for fear of being reprimanded, repercussions, or not being able to move up in the organization. We specifically heard that there are different standards that white individuals can get away with certain behaviors that BIPOC counterparts cannot. And finally, echoing the interview theme, is hiring practices need to be reevaluated to promote DEI, specifically looking at diversifying the applicant pool, making sure that all capable individuals are provided that fair opportunity, and looking to reduce the impact of unconscious bias in decision-making. So those are some of the high level themes. Next, I'll turn it over to Maya to talk a little bit about the audit process.
Sure, thanks, Aaron. You can actually go forward 2 slides here. All right, thank you. So we reviewed over 100 different policy, practice, and procedure documentation, and we also reviewed de-identified employee data for high-level inequities. So I'm going to be going over the results of both of these reviews. First, regarding MCPL's policies and practices, much of the documentation fulfilled many DEI best practices as established by the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion benchmarks, and also our own expertise in DEI. The documentation and policies are well developed, thorough, and standardized in many areas. And we know that there's additional standardization already occurring to much of the documentation, which is a great sign of progress and continued commitment. We provided those involved with a comprehensive overview of all the documentation provided to us, but to highlight some of the main areas that could be further developed, we've included 3 broad areas here. So first, we found that there was a lot of gendered language and gendered concepts in a lot of the documentation. So we recommended swapping this for gender neutral terms and also making sure that things like, just domestic partner language is explicitly included rather than just saying spouse or husband and wife. We also found that in some of the standard operating procedures, there was some potential bias and exclusion. So we recommended increasing job application inclusiveness, standardizing some decision-making procedures, removing items that were not inclusive or where biases may exist. And then we also found that there was a need for clearly outlined DEI definitions and values. So at the moment, there were diversity and inclusion definitions present, but we recommended including equity and also making sure that all the definitions are broad and inclusive so that way everybody feels represented. We also recommended clearly stating the library's specific values around diversity, equity, and inclusion rather than just providing the definitions, just so that way people understand where the library stands in relation to these issues. Next slide, please. Moving on to some of the employee demographics, we analyzed and broke out employee data by race and ethnicity, gender, leadership status, and other areas to review frequencies and average pay. It is important to note that this review was a high-level overview, so a comprehensive compensation audit is still needed. But some of the DEI-related findings that we found include some gender inequity with respect to pay. Namely, women make less than men on average, despite making up the majority of the workforce, and this difference was more noticeable for those who made salaries rather than wages. We unfortunately couldn't look at any discrepancies in pay with those who identify as non-binary or transgender, as categories outside the male and female binary were not used at the time. Whenever we looked into pay by race and ethnicity, we found that there were too few people of color to calculate meaningful pay averages and make inclusive statements about the inequities. But regarding the frequencies, non-white individuals became less prevalent as position level increased, and leadership in general is lacking non-white individuals. One instance that we found particularly notable was that there was only one BIPOC manager at the time of the analyses, and there were no non-white assistant managers. That being said, these are all areas that can be developed going forward. So now I'm going to pass it back to Gloria to discuss recommendations based on the entire audit.
Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So what are the next steps? The next step is the DEI Council. And you've already identified the council and you have 2 leaders identified as well. And that is a best practice. But let's just take a moment to talk about the DEI Council. They are going to look at the data that we are presenting, the report that we have given to the library, and then they have to make some decisions and priorities about what you want to work on first, because this is a journey, but there are some best practice things that you do immediately. That is developing a DEI definition and developing that very broadly, because DEI is inclusive of every patron, inclusive of every employee. Yet the focus right now is internally. So the definition of DEI, what is the mission, the vision, the values for the library as well? And what is your philosophical statement, the statement that you want to present to the public and to your employees about what DEI means to you as an organization? And the other things about DEI is a communication strategy, because many times people think that this is only about race and gender. It is inclusive of, but much broader than. The communication strategy also talks about that this does not mean sacrificing the quality of the employees that you hire. It means casting your net much broader. Sometimes it's mistaken that DEI means we're only looking for diverse characteristics of certain people to hire. That is not true. That is a myth. And so communicating that it's inclusive of everyone, it's meant to cast a broader net, and that there are qualified, diverse candidates out there as well to look for. We also know that doing this work means that happy employees mean happy patrons, and that you can better align with your vision, your strategy as a library as a whole. So those are all the things that a DEI council talks about that's in their purview. And at some point, to give them additional data is the recommendation of a DEI survey. So they have a lot of work cut out for them, but this is a journey. And the first part of that is looking at the report and deciding what they want to work on as initiatives. So with that, I'll ask for the next slide, which is really, this is now Q&A time. And any questions that you might have about the information. I know we've gone through this quickly, but this is a time to ask questions. I'll turn it back over to the chair of the board.
Thank you very, very much. Very informative report. I forgot to mention earlier that following your report out to the Personnel Committee, and following discussion and question, the committee did vote to recommend to the full board to acknowledge and accept the audit report. At this time, I'd like to open up to any questions that our board members may have of Hicks Carter Hicks regarding their findings in this report.
I'd like to make a clarification, if I could, because in the Personnel Committee, we voted to accept that we heard the report. We did not have a vote that we agreed with anything on it. I want to make sure that's clarified.
Any questions?
Aaron, hi. I have a question for you. When you talked about the external stakeholders, could you give us a little bit of information on the number of people? Were they interviewed by branches, or just an overview of that process for the external?
Sure. So the external stakeholders, they were identified collaboratively with members of the diversity task force. They are individuals who are outside of the library, who their organizations work very closely with the library. Obviously, due to anonymity, I don't want to speak to what organization they were a part of, but it was a joint collaboration to determine who we talked to on that process.
So those persons' organizations were provided to you?
Yes. So we identified generally who is those organizations that work very closely with the library, and we were given those 3 names that we decided to work with.
Okay, great. And it's a term I'm not familiar with, so if you could give me a very naive elementary, what do you mean by code switching?
I might not be the best person to speak to code switching, but the general understanding is that individuals, and it's typically applied to those who are African American or Black, have to change their demeanor so that they can more easily assimilate with white culture. They're not allowed to be their authentic selves, so it's changing their language, vernacular, way of speaking, how they present themselves essentially. And please, anyone jump in to correct my definition or understanding there. It's something I've never had to do personally.
That is how I would describe it also, Aaron. So you did well. Yes.
Okay, and then this code switching would be having a detrimental effect to the person involved?
Yes, it does. There's a scientific study about how difficult it is for people trying to live 2 different lives, the stress, physical and mental. Because most of the time when this is going on with BIPOC individuals, in particular, African American Black employees, they're not able to be their authentic self, because being your authentic self in a majority environment might mean you're not promoted, you're not paid the same, you're not given equitable opportunities. And so code switching is something that has been around for a very long time. And it just simply means that, you know, you are not your authentic self. But being your authentic self doesn't necessarily just mean BIPOC individuals as well. It can mean the LGBTQ plus community may not be able to talk about their family members, put up family pictures, because people think specifically a family looks like something traditional, whatever traditional is. And so many people who can't be their authentic self cannot do their best work because they do not feel valued, and they're often not as engaged as they would like to be because they don't feel appreciated in the workplace. And we know employee engagement and authenticity means better productivity, means better customer service.
And it's important to note that this is distinct from professional appearance or anything like that, because a lot of times it gets conflated as the two, and this is completely different things.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, so then say, how about somebody is a Christian and they feel like they can't, so they wouldn't be able, maybe they can't express their views about their faith. And so does this apply to them or only to people of color and other groups? Where do you draw the line?
I don't personally draw the line. Again, I'm going from the data that was presented to me. People talked specifically, BIPOC employees talked about how their white counterparts are allowed to engage in behaviors such as passionate debate, disagreeing with one another, and their white counterparts were allowed to do it, but these BIPOC individuals weren't. So nobody provided any information on religion, Christian ideals, or anything like that. So,
well, maybe
I would just clarify, just to answer your question, I would clarify that most code switching occurs because people have lived and grown up in a culture that shapes everything that they are. Not so much one aspect like a religious belief or something like that, but their entire being is steeped in a certain culture, music, tradition, ways of speaking. And that's really what code switching refers to, not a specific religious practice, although there can be issues around diversity of thought and maybe people challenge that. But culture is the very fiber of people's being.
Well, I tend to totally disagree with what you said. You're assuming that that's the case. I think someone's faith, especially to a Christian, that's their whole identity is in their faith. Now, I do know, because I've heard that people of faith, especially Christians today, are feeling that they're not able to be their authentic self, because if they bring up anything that goes against, say, homosexual community or against another group, then they can't be their authentic self. So what I'm saying, I think with your diversity, I do hope that it includes all groups and not just specific groups.
Yemi, I think we've moved from question and answer to comment. And I wanted to save discussion for another time.
Okay, well, I can ask this as a question because it is a question. My question is, how does this apply?
Before you start,
how does this apply? You say you are able to ask questions, so I'm going to ask a question. I want to know.
Yemi, just a minute. I'm putting a parameter around the questions because at this point, we're asking questions of Hicks Carter Hicks, not of staff, not of the organization.
I'm asking a question of
Can I finish?
Okay, well, you haven't let me finish, so I guess we're just interrupting each other. Go ahead.
Right now, we're asking questions of Hicks Carter Hicks. We're not prepared tonight in this setting to go into a deep discussion with the board. That will occur at a different time.
No, my question, and I will say this, is of her. Does this apply equally to the Christian community? That was my question to her, not to you or anybody here. Thank you.
Gloria, here on that question is to you.
Okay, all right. Okay, we had mentioned earlier that DEI has to be defined by the organization and that it is broadly defined. And so DEI, if we really want to go to Title VII, Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VII, Religion is a protected class. And so DEI is inclusive of and much broader than the law. So it includes everybody, different thoughts, different work styles, different beliefs, different values. What organizations need to be mindful of, my background is 30 plus years of HR, is that you have to be mindful of not to try to convince or convict other people because they think or act differently, have different beliefs or values. So espousing what you believe in is one thing. Trying to force other people to believe the same is where we get into challenges. There's something called the platinum rule: treat people how they want to be treated, not how you think they should be treated. So that means getting to understand one another, appreciate, build relationships so that you have a better understanding and appreciation of people that are different. But yes, diversity also includes if you think different politically, if you think different religiously, and any other way. But it cannot be offensive to other people who may have a different opinion.
Thank you.
Perfect. I had another question. Gloria, you mentioned there are benchmarks. Are there any quantitative standards that can be applied by the library to determine whether or not we're approaching the benchmark or have actually reached it?
I'm going to ask Maya to answer that question because she is our benchmarking guru.
Sure. Yeah, so the benchmarks that we use are the Global Diversity, Equity, Inclusion benchmarks. And so these are benchmarks that are established by like 100 some odd panelists from around the world to determine what needs to be done at certain levels to hit DEI best practice. And so where the library currently sits, the way that Global Diversity, Equity, Inclusion benchmarks works is that there's about 15 different categories. So in some places, the library is doing best practice, and then in other areas, it's just more of like a compliance area. And so this is something that we would bring up with the board to kind of show them, all right, so here's the benchmarks that you're currently meeting, and here's where you can go next. And then here's another level above that. And it's not meant to hit everybody to DEI best practice. As we know, not even some of the largest companies can hit DEI best practice. Not everybody has the money to hit DEI best practice. A lot of times these require a lot of different pieces of infrastructure, a lot of technology that just not everybody can always afford. And so the whole point of the benchmarking system is just to get to where is most appropriate for your organization. And where we're seeing is that there are some places that can be improved, and then there's some places that are already hitting best practice.
Okay, so you mentioned attaining certain levels. Is there anything of an objective character that could tell the executives of the library whether or not they've met that level?
Yes, so the GDEIB is that objective measure. So each level or each they call them chapters essentially. So each chapter has different, essentially like a checklist. And so we were able to checklist on each of the areas that the library met and what is the next best step for that. So it depends on the area that we're talking about. Organizations are really complex, so they always have a lot of these different chapters that you can look at. And certainly not every single chapter should be addressed all at once, just because that's a lot of work. That's a lot of emphasis. But something that we did do with the document audit was that we gave very specific recommendations to get it up to best practice and what should be done to get to that point, and also areas that have already been met to that point.
Another question, I don't think we covered this during the personnel meeting, but if I understand correctly, you said there's greater spread in the wages paid to persons of different classifications among the salaried as opposed to the wage earners. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the salaried, I'm assuming, are those in management?
It depends. So the employee data kind of showed that people who are in the salary level maybe were across different areas. I can't speak to whether or not people in salary were always people in management, but typically it does result in people in more of an admin or leadership position overall. But there are some people who make salary in other places. It sort of depends on the pay class. That's a sort of an HR issue.
Okay, so then if we use that old-fashioned, admittedly outdated pyramid structure, at the base of the pyramid where we have wage earners, there is more diversity. and inclusion and equity, and it decreases as we go up.
Yes. So, well, overall, the library is kind of lacking in diversity throughout all levels. I think if I remember correctly, I believe that there's only 164 people of color as to the whole like 1,500 system. I could be wrong on those numbers. I'll have to double check. So overall, there's not a whole lot of diversity within library staff. However, of the diversity that does exist, and I cannot speak for race and ethnicity just because there were just too few people of color to calculate that and make meaningful or conclusive statements on those areas. But with respect to gender, there was enough diversity there. Still not as much, but quite a bit. And so that's what we found was people who were on salary, who were women, tended to make less than men on salary.
Okay, women making less than males, assuming same duration in their position, comparable positions, same, is actually same time on the job?
Most times, yes, but like I said, this was a very high level overview, so I can't say for certain at this point because that was not within the scope of the project. A comprehensive compensation audit will be needed to like make those sorts of conclusive statements, and that's something that can be done internally by HR.
And is underway.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess the diversity task force, you said again, somebody said something about 3 names, like, is that, there was 3 organizations you worked with, or there was 3 people that you worked with?
You've identified 2 people for your diversity council. Is that the question?
Well, I don't know, I wrote down, somebody said something about a diversity.
I think Erin mentioned that there were 3 sources of information from the external perspective.
Oh, okay.
Three external partners, community or organizations that work closely with the library were identified, and we did that to kind of parallel some of the internal data we collected.
Okay, and
who identified those 3 people or those 3 partners as the partners that we were going to speak with?
that was going to be my next question. Thank you, Noel.
Yes.
Sorry.
And I believe that question was asked, like I mentioned earlier, that was a collaborative process between us and the library. We had said we want to talk to those organizations that partnered very closely with the library. So in working with the diversity task force, we identified those 3 organizations and the 3 individuals within that organization to talk to.
Okay, and what counties were they from?
Ooh, I can't speak to that off the top of my head. And again, we're getting dangerously close to anonymity confidentiality.
Well, I guess you want us to accept the recommendations of your study that frankly is you cherry picked what you wanted. I can do a study and I can, depending on who I pick, I can get whatever answers I want.
Can I say something here? We are not asking anyone to accept the recommendations. Many of the companies that we work with, they look at the recommendations and they decide what they are going to do or they're not going to do. As was mentioned earlier, this is not an audit like a gap, an audit of policies, practices, and procedures, gap accounting principles, legal guidelines. This is based on DEI best practices and looking at things through a DEI lens. So this is not compliance related. This is truly voluntary. And you all volunteered to have a DEI audit to bring to surface the things that you might want to work on. And let me also mention something else about a DEI audit, especially when we are talking to people and when you actually do a survey. It is based on people's perspective. And perspective is their perception, is their truth and their reality, whether it is true or real or not. But you do have to manage to reality off. You do have to manage to people's reality, their perceptions oftentimes. So we are not saying that you must do anything. We are simply making recommendations based on best practices. It is within the library's purview to decide what you will or will not do?
In addition, if you look at the full report, the external stakeholder themes are a very small part of it. The majority of what we talked about was the hard analysis that Maya talked about. We also used the interviews. We identified prior to actually engaging in the interviews which groups we wanted to talk to. And then we randomly selected for the focus groups as well to make sure we get that well-rounded perspective so that we could avoid any cherry picking, as you mentioned.
So are you able to tell me about the percentages of people and the different genders and the different colors and the different nationalities that you interviewed in your focus group and your interviews?
Yes, altogether we did 5 focus groups with 42 individuals. I believe we have it in the full report, which is not in front of me at the moment, but we do give a breakdown of how many individuals participated in each focus group.
And were those individuals, are those people that volunteered to do that?
Well, the way we did it for the first 4, so that was Black or African American employees, employees who were persons of color besides Black or African American, white individuals, and assistant managers. What we got was a de-identified Excel spreadsheet from HR that had no names, just people's identified race, ethnicity, and their position. And then we used a random number generator to select those individuals. We selected 15 from each group, sent them emails inviting they could either select to participate or not. For members of the LGBTQ+ community, that's obviously information not captured by HR. So what we did is we sent an email out broadly to everyone in the organization, asking those who are members of the community or allies, if they are interested in participating, to email us back. We got a ton of emails from that, so we randomly selected from those individuals who are interested in participating.
Okay, and then were they interviewed as groups? I mean, I'm assuming a focus group was a group of people, or were they interviewed individually?
It was a focus group. So we had these individuals all together, asked a series of predetermined questions, and allowed them to discuss.
Aaron, I had a question for you. You said in the focus group for LGBTQ, you said allied. Does that mean that you talk to people outside the employee base of the library?
No, those were individuals who were in the organization. All our focus groups were individuals who were employees. And these are people who are supportive of the LGBTQ+ community, but they themselves do not identify as members. This is a best practice. So for those who are not out in the workplace or not comfortable discussing it, they have the opportunity to participate as an ally.
And those persons are employees?
Everyone was employees for the focus groups, yes.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
Rita?
I would just like to commend the library for doing this kind of assessment. And I would remind people, this kind of DEI assessment is a best practice, and it's being done by many organizations, both public and private, as well as government. Because the fact is, our customer base, no matter what business you're in, is becoming more diverse. And I think you have to really pay attention to these kind of factors if you want to continue to serve your broad customer base that most cities have. So I really want to commend you for doing this kind of assessment, and I hope we're able to utilize some of the results for the greater good.
That's a good point, because another one of our clients happens to be the St. Louis County Library. We have seen similar requests from Boise Public Library. These audits are standard best practice. They are being done all across the country by various different industries. We've also done some pro bono work for libraries. So libraries, like as has been mentioned, this is something that is a standard operating practice right now.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the benchmarks and who it is that is setting those? I've been looking kind of online, trying to find some guidance as to where those benchmarks are coming from. Are they from the federal government?
No, so these are the Global Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Benchmarks. They're run by an organization that's international. So these are from international points of view with many people representing the United States. But they do the international way, so that way this can be applied in different organizations across the world, specifically like if they're doing globalization efforts or anything like that. However, all of these benchmarks are relevant to the United States.
Okay.
And what is the name of the company or the group that support those benchmarks?
Let me pull that up for you.
It
Just
is Alan Richter, Dr. Alan Richter, and Julie Omer. And personally, I have worked with both of these individuals over the years since the 90s. So a lot of this is also very applicable to what is happening in the US. There is another organization called diversityinc.com. We also use diversityinc.com. And it's been around, I don't know, for probably over 20 years. And then there is also Diversity Best Practice. And there's also the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM. So we have used all of these different data points and resources for looking at best practices, US and international. And it's something that Maya also said. We recognize that not everybody is going to want to do all of the things that are in the GDEIB because they don't have the time, the money, the resources, or the desire, but they are best practices. Julie O'Mara has been doing this work since, I know, the 80s. Dr. Alan Richter has written books on DEI. I was actually trained and worked as a co-consultant with Julie O'Mara. But Maya will point out something here. I did not know the GDEIB was actually written by those two people that I knew until after I saw it and said, after doing this work for over 35 years, this is solid work and research across the globe.
And I did want to add, it is sponsored by the Center for Global Inclusion. They can be found at centerforglobalinclusion.org. And instead of spelling center the way that we normally do, it's CENTRE. And that's just to reflect it having a UK base.
Excuse me, before anybody speaks, would you please identify yourself? It'd be so helpful to us on the board, as well as the fact that Teresa is working feverishly to detect voices. So that'd be very much appreciated.
I'm sorry, Teresa, this is Noelle. I have one more question. Are we able to see the actual questions that were asked? I mean, word for word, the verbiage that was used when you asked and conducted these interviews and focus groups? Is that in the report?
I believe that is, I don't want to speak out of school. Let me quick pull that up.
I'm trying to go to it also, Aaron, if there's an exhibit in there. I don't remember. And I would also mention that while these are interviews, these are conversations. The same as with the focus groups. These are conversations and not your traditional type of interviews. It is to at least get people to discussing what's going on. There's a communication strategy that is also sent out. The library did that. Sent out communication information to talk to people about their initiative, their efforts. And so this is more of a conversation with people than it is an interview. But yes, there were one-on-one interviews, and there were also group interviews that we did and focus groups as well.
And this is Aaron Van Groningen. They are not listed in the report, but we are able to provide those.
Hey, we're going to recognize Rita for a question.
Rita, yeah. I'd like to make a comment and then ask you a question about it. If you're fishing in a pond full of turtles and you've got the right bait, you're going to catch turtles. If you're fishing in a pond of salmon and you've got the right bait, you're going to catch salmon. Now, it just depends on where you're fishing and what you're supplying them with. That's, I guess, what concerns us is that we would like to have a little bit more information about what the supplies are. And diversity for diversity's sake is unconstitutional.
This is Aaron Van Groningen. Just about your point about fishing, that's why, as I mentioned, we did the random selection to make sure that we had a good selection of ponds or pools, I guess, to pull from to get the information.
That being said, sorry, this is Maya. With the initial interviews, these were not focus groups that had specifically these individuals. We took any employees from various levels of the organization. So that way we were not just highlighting the perspectives of just those people who diversity includes, just in general thoughts of diversity, but also just generally everybody who is included in diversity. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
And my next question is, did you take into consideration that we live in 3 of the counties that are quite different from each other, both rural and urban, and a mix? Did you take that into consideration?
Yes, we did.
How does that figure into your study?
Well, some of your areas that may be even rural our demographics are changing. And we do have a list of the demographics by the different areas. And I think if we're talking about diversity here, it is not just a race and gender matter. It can be diversity of thought, diversity of abilities, people with different physical abilities. It's just not race and gender. So not everything is a surface characteristic that you can see. It can be different opinions on things. I think it was just mentioned earlier. Well, is religion a part of that? Politics a part of that? What you value is a part of that. So not everything in the census data or the demographics can be seen as it relates to diversity. There can be a group of all like people that are diverse.
Well, I have another question. Oh,
No,
I'm just wondering if I ask you, you're okay. Okay, thank you, Ron. Yeah, so what you just said, it's sort of like you're contradicting yourself in a bit. So maybe you can help us understand like how you actually chose these 5 groups, and by choosing those, you are making some type of assumptions. These are the most important ones we need to know about. So when you talk about diversity, it's like we're all diverse, even if we were all African American, if we were all Anglo, we are diverse in all different ways. So, but you have to, in order to do these things, you have to make certain choices. So how do you make those choices?
Well, let's talk about DEI in general for a minute. You know, a lot of organizations, I think it was mentioned that these assessments are not new. They are becoming more prevalent, and they are becoming more prevalent because of the things that went on last year in 2020. So there are some priorities that you have to set, and many businesses decided to focus on the priorities because there were health disparities that rose to the top last year, economic challenges, pandemic, and many other things, and also racial injustice and social justice issues. So this is a journey, DEI. And what you have to look at, you only have so much time, money, energy, and resources to deal with things at once. So you deal with those things that are the most pain points for you. Last year, the pain points that many businesses across the globe saw, and in particular the US, was something that's been a challenge for many, many years, and that was the racial and social injustice. And so that's a given to say, okay, then we probably from a diversity perspective need to keep that in mind when we're looking at priorities, but that is not the only priority. So when we look at individuals who are minoritized, and we look at individuals that are underrepresented, and we look at what the census data says, the economic data says, that those are probably areas that we need to focus on. They're important, but it does not exclude other people. And so that is how you make some of the decisions. Where are your biggest pain points that you need to address? But you absolutely, positively, unequivocally do not forget about the other areas of DEI. That's why we said earlier, the definition for the library for DEI needs to be broad. But yes, you are correct. You have to start somewhere. And you start where the data says we have the most underrepresented minoritized people in the workforce. And then, as Maya said, looking at some of those numbers, and we're recognizing that, Maya, you said there were no people of color in a leadership role, and that, or let me make sure, Maya, is that correct?
Whenever we're talking about branch managers specifically, there was a single BIPOC individual. And then whenever we're looking at assistant managers, there were none.
So when you look at the demographic data, inclusive of your territory, but just look at it in the US, the demographics are changing. And most of the time, somebody mentioned the pyramid effect, that most of the demographics show that the diversity is at the front of the organization and not evenly dispersed throughout. So you know those are things that you have to pay attention to. And you also know that some of your areas are, their demographics are changing. So you just have to pay attention to those things. By no means are we saying other areas of diversity are not important. We are saying figure out where you want to spend your time, energy, effort, and money and resources, and what your biggest pain points are, and deal with some of those things first. But it is your choice.
I would like to recognize Brent next.
Brent Schondemeyer, trustee. Just a quick comment. I realize it's question and answer. I truly appreciate the report, the full report. I printed it out and I read it and I went through it. And like anything, it just takes me additional time to digest it. And I actually watched the personnel committee meeting online. And so I recognize the conversation that occurred before. Having said that, I want to be clear. I think I heard this was not a evaluation of whether our current policies are consistent with current employment law, because that's not the purpose of this audit, but I want to have somebody clarify that for me.
No, it really is not. Okay. If we happen to see, and we did recommend that you go talk to lawyers, your employment attorneys, but let me be clear, we are not employment attorneys. HROD professionals have an understanding of employment regulations, but we say you need to have your employment attorneys look at things to make sure they're in line with the law. For instance, June 2020, the Civil Rights Act Title 7, 1964 changed to include sexual orientation, this is federal law, sexual orientation, transgender, Maya help me here, and non-binary.
Yeah, gender identity and gender expression.
Thank you. And so we know that because we are members of the Society for Human Resource Management, which is ran by a lawyer. So we stay aligned with the employment guidelines, but we are not lawyers. So we defer to lawyers. And I think we have a statement in there that says, defer to your employment attorneys, because we are not.
No, I appreciate that, but in some ways that to me an area of some interest for me that that's some work needs to be done. I realize that this is an unfolding conversation and there's some discretionary policy choices here, and there's this is not the first conversation we'll have about it. There's just one commentary. Apologies to the chair of the personnel committee. A couple of times it's been referenced that there was a one African-American branch manager. Actually, that was at the time of the audit. Honestly, that person retired recently. So the factual statement today is that there are no. And this happened to be at a branch that primarily serves the Hickman Mills School District. And I can share this with the with my fellow board members in the Hickman Mill School District is 90.5% non-white. So to me, there's this fundamental sort of issue that our workforce does not represent the communities that we serve in. And this was work done by the Park Hill School District, and it's a changing demographic really across all of our districts. And I want to hold that up. It's not in the way of a question, so my apologies for inserting it into the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Brent. This is Ron. I have a question I think ties to Brent's. We do not have diversity, equity, inclusion as it's defined in the upper management of, well, in any management of our branches. But if the requirements of this library system is to have certain qualifications that include, like, for example, a master's in library science to fill that position, and the only ones who present themselves with those credentials for that position are not within the, other than basically Caucasian males, what are we supposed to do? Adjust the qualifications or what?
This is Aaron McGronigan. We actually heard directly from individuals who are employed at both senior level positions and entry level positions. And recommendations we heard was partnering with schools specifically to highlight potential careers in library sciences, letting people know that that's an available option for them, providing internships, things like that. People also mentioned, again, directly employees said tuition assistance. And people also said that the library does a good job, does a good job of internal promotion, which is good, but they also highlighted that the issue might be that the pool tends to be rather homogenous. So they said looking for those partnerships to diversify the applicant pool. And then also for entry-level positions, people and branch managers themselves specifically said that they tend to default to people who have previous library experience, even though it doesn't actually impact people's performance, that it would be more beneficial to look for things like interpersonal skills, organization skills. A refrain we heard from multiple individuals we interviewed and in focus groups: you can train library skills, it's difficult to train those other interpersonal skills. So it's more about reevaluating the approach to applicants and reevaluating the approach to the hiring decisions being made. And again, that's just directly from what MCPL staff themselves said.
Okay, but Aaron, if the perceived requirements of certain academic or experience within a position, and the only people that come up are from a very homogeneous pool, what would you recommend? And I totally agree that having career exposure to kids in high school is great, or even college, but still, you get a freshman in college, you get 4 years of college, and 2 years of master's program, we might see you in 7 years.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I can tell you that some of the library systems we worked with have actually relaxed their requirement for a master's of library science.
Any results on how effective that was?
Good idea.
They have actually seen a broader increase of non-white candidates by individuals reaching out for those positions. They've also done a bunch of other work that has gone to highlight that the library is a place for everyone in the community. So I think there's no one kind of magic answer here. It's a bunch of different things taken into consideration based on your strategic plan and the services and everything that MCPL is trying to do.
And Aaron, I'd like to add to that, because the other part of it is too, having a broad-based diversity, equity, and inclusion recruiting strategy. And so some of our clients are looking at where they recruit, how they recruit, what they're willing to even pay for in terms of helping people get the necessary degrees or skills that they need. But generally, this is something that's we see on whether we are working with engineers, scientists, librarians, this topic has come up oftentimes. And what we have said is that you have to cast your net wider and you have to have a strategy for going to non-traditional places to find people and to start very early when people are just forming an idea about what kind of careers they want, middle school, high school, mentoring into the high school and middle schools. And so just really expanding your outreach. What it does not mean is that you will hire substandard people. But it does mean that you might look at your hiring practices to see if there are biases built in that might exclude underrepresented and minoritized people.
Any other questions or for the trustees? There's a trustees comment towards the end. If we, as trustees, wish to pursue this, that certainly is an option. But we have the folks from Hicks here encroaching upon their day also. So, any further questions for auditors? Okay, Joyce, let me turn it over to you, please.
Thanks, Ron. At this point, given all the questions, we're looking at this point, similar to what we do with the financial audit, is look to vote to acknowledge an acknowledgement and an acknowledgement of the receipt of the report, if that helps to clarify for some of our board members. Again, this audit does not come with mandates. It comes with suggestions. It comes with best practices. It comes with benchmarks to look at. It comes with a lot of information from our employees. And I think that it's going to take staff a while to digest all of it. And it's going to take the DEI Council a while to take a look at all of it as well. And I would encourage my fellow board members to allow staff to be able to look at how the information fits with our mission, vision, and values. At this point, I would entertain a motion to acknowledge acknowledge the receipt of the DEI audit.
Can I just clarify that? That
I'm
could come as a
confused.
motion.
I'm confused. Why, we don't have to vote to acknowledge we received anything. We just need to vote, if I'm not mistaken, we just need to vote if some action is required, like we're voting to accept these recommendations. Why do we have to vote that we heard something?
Oh.
I'm confused.
I think I would envision as something like a package is given to me, I acknowledge receiving it, and then I open it up to see if I accept it. Something like that, where we're acknowledging receiving a report, and we're not acknowledging in any way that we're going to be making any decisions upon it.
Well, I think the decisions have already been made, it sounds like.
I don't think so at all.
There's a council set up, so there's no council set up.
Nope, absolutely.
Yummy. I will say any decisions that are in the process are totally within the purview of the director. Given that we have given him this directive to take a look at our diverse workforce. This is something that staff has been working on for almost a couple of decades now. So there are going to be slight adjustments and looking at it and taking a look at it. Anything that will require board action would be brought to the board. But anything that does not require board action can be acted upon by our director and staff.
Well, I understand. I'm still confused about why we're voting that we heard something.
I think that's exactly it. We're just voting, we're acknowledging that we have been handed this report, we're acknowledging that we have it in our hands. Not that we're going to do anything with it, or if so, to what extent.
I don't know, is that acceptable to everyone?
I'm confused too, because I think acknowledging that we've heard it, we have it in our hands, means we're going ahead with it.
I think, okay, we have a lawyer. Why don't you tell us?
I mean, you've got a motion on the floor. It doesn't require a second because it comes from the committee. And so it's a up or down motion. You've received it. Your question really goes to why you're doing it. The motion's been made, is why you're voting yes or no.
Wait, I don't understand.
And I'll go ahead, I'm sorry, but I'll go ahead and call the question. This is traditionally how we handle reports. There's nothing necessarily different about this, where I believe, Yummy, I've tried to accommodate you by adjusting the wording to receiving. There's nothing about receiving that you've, acknowledging that you've heard something that indicates any kind of acceptance. So at this point, I'd like to call the question and call for.
I haven't heard any benchmarks and I haven't heard any evidence.
I'm sorry, I've called the question.
Reread the motion.
Recommendation for the Personnel Committee to the full board to accept the DEI audit report.
To accept it.
Teresa, that has been amended to accept the receipt, or to acknowledge the receipt.
To acknowledge the receipt, okay.
Acknowledge the receipt of the DEI audit.
Okay, to acknowledge.
If I could throw in, I physically accepted the audit report at the personnel committee, and I accepted it. But then I read it over and I'm still reading over it. So all I'm just saying is that I acknowledging getting the report, and I'm not acknowledging at all if I disagree with any part of it.
I can reread the motion if you want.
That would be great.
Anyway, recommendation from the Personnel Committee to the full board to acknowledge the receipt of the DEI audit report.
Ron, I may acknowledge your package.
Point of order. Point of order. I believe the question has been called.
I don't have to accept the package.
Bill?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Ron, you gotta call.
Okay, call the lawyer for the Robert's rules.
You're ready to vote?
What's that?
You've got to vote?
And we have the, what's the motion again?
Recommendation from the Personnel Committee to the full board to acknowledge the receipt of the DEI audit report.
Okay, it's been moved as Teresa had read. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Any abstaining?
Aye.
Motion's carried.
Can I get I'm gonna ask individually because I can't tell who's speaking. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. Joycelyn?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
Michelle?
No.
Rita?
No.
Ron?
Yes.
Yummy?
No.
Michael?
No.
Lori?
I abstain.
Noel?
No.
Susan?
Yes.
Okay. I have 5 yeas, 4 nays, and 1 abstain, and the motion fails.
Okay, next matter. Juneteenth.
At this point, I'm gonna have to leave this with you, Ron, because I need to leave to attend my son's concert. So I have to get him there by 5:30.
Okay.
Just real quickly, in terms of the rest of the Personnel Committee report, we did take, as you might remember, Juneteenth was declared a federal holiday last year in 2020. The library is under no obligation to observe any holidays necessarily. But we decided, there was a conversation about what to do about Juneteenth specifically. It's not really clear how this holiday is going to be celebrated. Is it going to be celebrated with community events? Is it going to be celebrated by people staying home with family? It wasn't clear. And so one of the things that we pointed out, that staff pointed out, is that all of our employees have a number of floating holidays that they can take for any reason, or to observe any holidays or personal days that might be of importance to them. And so staff was recommending at this particular point in time to carry on, to recognize Juneteenth as a holiday, but not to close or to make it a paid holiday, and to allow staff to continue, or to allow staff to use their floating holidays for now, but to come back and revisit this question sometime in the future, once it becomes more clear as to how the holiday will be celebrated. So no decision item, just a report. The other thing that the committee discussed, there was a conversation about an item that was referred to committee. You might remember back in July, there was an email message that was sent from an employee. And essentially it was concerning the COVID resilience pay for performance that we made. The recommendation from the employee was that we should have been doing this not as we did it, but as a flat rate across the board. Paying employees at a flat rate across the board is by definition a bonus, and bonuses are illegal for governmental entities and for government employees. So the recommendation of the staff member could not be fulfilled because it's not legal for us to do what was recommended. And that concludes my recollection, what the personnel committee discussed.
The building committee.
We have two significant decision items tonight. Many of the building committee, actually the full building committee was together when we met last Thursday. We met prior to the board meeting because we wanted to bring a recommendation. These are consequential financial decisions, and so I, hope that they've been fully vetted, but we're come before the full board and we're open to any questions that people might have. The first item is the guaranteed maximum price on North Oak, and if somebody can advance the slides. You can see pictures are in your packet of the elevations of what it is that it looks like. North Oak is on the current existing site of where our library is. We finally experienced what other people in the business have experienced: increased construction costs due to supply line material cost and the like, and so this came in a little bit higher than what we originally estimated. Jake may be on the phone or not, or in the meeting. We went back and we looked at it. We worked through a series of lists. I think I don't have it in front of me. There were probably 60 different items, which we tried to figure out whether this was important to the program or important to the building. And we were able to reduce the original bid that we got by additional $300,000. And what the committee wants to bring to you is a motion that says approval of a recommendation from the building committee to the full board to accept work package 12 North Oak for the total guaranteed maximum price of $6,718,442 to be paid from the capital projects fund, and approval authorizing staff to draft a notice to proceed. So that's the motion, and because it comes from the committee, I don't think it requires a second. I defer to anybody who is on the building committee who wants to, provide a comment or additional detail before we.
If you would, Cody, can you advance just a couple of pages, just because, actually go back one, and we just want to take a look at the building. So this is the new North Oak that we're talking about. So this is it from right across the street. It's a little far away, but I think one of the reasons why we got this was to make sure that you could see the new monument sign that's part of this, which will help identify where the building is and where you're supposed to turn. If you go to the next slide, this is actually from the back. This is from Locust Street. And so far we've had no comments about the rear of the building. But I mean, it's one of these things that we did take a lot of time trying to design a building that would be attractive for our neighbors, that would blend in with the residential development that we abut. And then next slide, is actually from this would be like the southeast, right? Yeah, southeast corner of the parking lot, of the southwest corner of the parking lot, southeast corner of the building. So you can kind of see what the building's looking like.
Comments that were raised, just to share them, is that, were we sacrificing landscaping? And the answer was no. The question is, there was a skylight, were we sacrificing natural light and that we were creating a dark interior effect? And the answer to that was no. The question was raised is that this is a building that has an elevator and a generator was one of the items that wasn't funded. Staff assured us is that the feature of this elevator is that it had one more ride in it, if power happened to go out, and that satisfied us as to the safety of the elevator in the case of a power outage. Question was raised, could we get a lower cost by reducing the square footage? I think this is 17,000 square feet. And the comment that came back is that you would, the additional costs in re-engineering it and redesigning it and rebidding it could, for all practical purposes, exceed the $300,000 in additional cost. So I want to say it was a fulsome conversation really around this. I want to thank Michelle for kind of keeping us grounded and staying where it is that we are. Because if we moved, we were going to incur additional land cost. And I want to thank Michael for making sure that the water drainage issues, well, these are favors that we owe future boards. If we know of a problem that we're aware of, that we should fix them as we go. I think all of this has been sort of addressed. And frankly, the value of working with the same professional services and some allowed us to go back and make solid sound judgments because of this building, we paid, this for this, and we have a history of what it is it costs to do these buildings and what certain products, can cost. And so that's, I hope it's a fair characterization really of what the building committee discussed. And if anybody else has anything to add to prior to the vote, I would encourage them to.
Well, I just have a couple of things. I just appreciate all the work that Jake did on this project. I mean, it was
absolutely
very extensive in him going through the entire process of the building, seeing where we could cut different things. And I have the list here, and it was an amazing, extensive list. Nothing, I think no stone was left unturned, which is, I'm so appreciative of. And so that ended up with a savings of over $300,000 from the original. And I just feel really confident in Jake's explanation and going through this list with us, like point by point, item by item, basically. And I just feel really confident that all the work was done the way it should have been done. And so that's my comments.
Can we go back to the slide that shows the entrance off of North Ave with the library, the sign?
Yep, there you go.
The only thing, I mean, it's a later on thing we can discuss is just maybe a brighter, or a different color or something. Does that make sense? I mean, maybe it'll work. Sometimes.
It's lit.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that we were wanting to show with this.
You get going down North Ave and you kind of pop over.
Down it today, I know exactly.
Right, so you pop over that hill if you're going south, and sometimes it's like, it's gone before you know it.
Yeah,
that was my only.
Yeah, no, it's lit, and I think that's gonna help, that's gonna help some. We'll check on the coloring, because I think you're right, if we make sure that it's a good vibrant color. The one thing that
I always liked the, our other logo, just because
Well, and actually that was one of the things that we had to lose. We could save considerable money if we decreased the size of the base of the sign, and in doing so, it lost the logo. Okay. But we wanted to show that.
Well, I mean, and that works.
But it is lit, so that'll
help.
Yeah.
Steve, this is Lori Lamanian. I just have a quick question to ask you. I know that I'm new to the board, and so forgive me for asking this question kind of this late, but I know that Northland Cathedral, which is right up the street, has a bunch of land where they're building those apartments. And I actually was at a meeting with Kevin Smith, who is their pastor, and he was saying, he knew that I was on the board, and he was saying that at one point they had reached out to possibly have the library put on their land up there. And I just didn't know if that was like, you know, if you guys had looked at that and why that was decided against. I'm sorry that I'm asking this so late. I just didn't know about it until now.
I'd have to go back and look at my notes on that, Lori. I remember talking to him, but honestly, everything that happened before March of 2020 could be 5 years ago or 7 years ago, and my brain's.
Can I comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm sure.
You know, and this is Michelle, sorry. And I will say that I feel pretty strongly, and we've had these discussions in the building committee, whether here nor there, I don't know about that property or anything, but I mean, I do live right by there. I feel pretty strongly that that branch stays there. There's a lot of foot traffic. There's a lot of neighborhoods. It's just, that's an area that the library really needs to stay in that spot for demographic wise. So I think moving it farther north, I mean, because we discussed a lot of these things, and really moving it farther north would be doing a disservice to that area. I hope that makes sense, what I'm saying. Plus, we don't have the land costs.
Yeah, to Michelle's point, that when we settled on the location for Green Hills, we did start observing how far north and how far south could you go up and down North Oak Traffic Way. And the one thing we started to discover is the further north you go on North Oak Traffic Way, in a way, the closer you start getting to Green Hills.
Correct.
Because as the crow flies, you know, it's actually closer. But the further south you get on North Oak Traffic Way, you still have density, you have bus lines, things like that. So that's why when we started targeting our property location, after we decided on the Green Hills property, that we didn't look as far north as Northland Cathedral initially. But I do recall having those conversations, Lori. I do recall that.
Thank you. Yeah, they asked me and I was like, oh, I didn't know. So thank you for explaining that, both you, Michelle, and Steve. Thank you.
This is Brent Schonemeyer. If there's not any other questions on this particular project, I would call the question.
So just a simple vote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm sorry, opposed? And abstaining. It's passed.
Okay. For purpose, I should have said this earlier, for purposes of the new board members, the significance of the guaranteed maximum price means is that if it goes over that, it's not on us. And if it goes under that, it comes back into our bank account. So it establishes a firm price that allows us to sort of think about and budget for our next project. The next one is a Riverside update. I think we had a good conversation really about this at the last board meeting. I think there was a general consensus at that, you know, about proceeding on Riverside. But, you know, it's been a month and things can change, and the building committee looked at it yet again. What you have in the packet is a draft. I want to underscore that, a draft letter of intent that we were asked to develop by the city of Riverside. This will come back to us at a later point. If we decide to proceed with this project, understand our own attorney will review this very, very carefully prior to doing that. But in some senses, we promised and we made a commitment to the city of Riverside that we would provide them a firm answer really before the end of the year. It's October. We're honoring that commitment. Our staff have been in conversation with the folks at City Hall. They've been enthusiastic. You know, they may have a change of heart on their side and come back with something about this. I think Rita raised the question at the last board meeting we had of around sidewalks. They are checked with the City Hall. The City Hall has plans You know, I don't have a firm date, is that they recognize the need for sidewalks around the property, partly because they want to get access to their own city hall and access to the park. So that question was raised and staff followed up earlier on the question of sidewalks. Yes.
I also asked the question of number of children. Did you get an answer to that?
That I didn't, Rita. My memory doesn't serve me, but maybe one of our staff can provide that answer. You asked a specific question. Apologies, I didn't get you a specific answer, but you know, I need to write these things down. In general, the population in Riverside is growing. And that the purpose of the library is to serve children, but it's also to serve the larger community. And so I want to pause and see if maybe we can get an answer to that prior to the vote. And you did ask, and I.
Okay.
Yeah, give me just, I actually have it. I'm just trying to read the chart from the American Fact Finder. So in terms of total demographics, children, well, in terms of comparison, so children under the age of 5, 6 point percentages, 6% for the Mid-Continent District, 6.1% in Platte County, 6.7% in Riverside. Trying to see if we had just something that was just across the board with children, and we don't. In terms of growth, under 5 is Riverside. Under 5 from 2010 to 2015 is down a little. 5 to 9 is down a little, and then it starts picking up. Ages 10 to 14, it's up from 4.6% of the total population to 5.5. 15 to 17, 4.1, 3.9. 19 to 29, 16 to 16, 30 to 40 in the 20% range. And so all of those tend to be in that same ballpark. And if you remember from the census that we did present last time, the general new census projections, that Riverside was one of our faster growing communities across the board. But these numbers are older numbers. They're 2010 to 2015 projections, and we don't have anything from the 2020 census yet. So, but if we were going to characterize this, I would characterize this as that Riverside is a little bit above the bench. If you consider the entire mid-continent population, that the Riverside breakdown is a little younger than the average in the mid-continent district.
Rita, I don't think this is precisely your answer to your question, but actually on page 12 and page 13 of the booklet, there's the summary of some of the demographic information that was presented to us last time.
And I do want to clarify what Brent said before, and this is news to Mr. Grubaugh about this letter of intent. He hasn't seen it. But that was by design, that we asked Jake to draft this. As many of you know or may not know, Jake was a contracting officer for the U.S. Army for about 20 years. And this is definitely within his wheelhouse to draft something like this, to get reaction from the city's attorney. Then we'll have Phil look at it, and then we'll bring it back to the full board. That'll be the process.
Any other questions or any other comments, either from the building committee members and or from the board? We're headed to a vote here.
Can you use the motion again?
Excuse me.
I can read it.
The motion.
Oh, it's on the screen.
Oh, no, other people are online. I should be a reader. Approval of a recommendation from the building committee to the full board to accept a letter of intent drafted by MCPL staff and to share this with the city of Riverside. Final authorization of the letter will come after the city of Riverside returns the letter.
Thank you. We received Recommendation from the board. All in favor, please state by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? It's passed.
There may be other things, but frankly, these two are enough.
Okay.
Because these are pretty consequential.
So,
Yay on both of them. Yay.
sure.
Well, excuse me, actually, I misspoke. There was a nice report about an update about the projects, and I don't want to give short shrift to other things that are underway, and so maybe staff can.
Would you like me to run through those real quick?
Yeah.
I can do that. I'd be happy.
Real quickly, I mean,
Right, so.
it's important to keep
Yeah,
up
so
with that.
next up, Cody. This is the dashboard, and of course, the dashboard placemat kind of keeps you in track with where we are. Two things that I want to point out, I mean, please look at this closely and please feel free to ask questions. But we're still on track in terms of our budget, which is extremely important. The other thing, in terms of the color coding, remember that the black lines essentially mean that it's done. Contracted, finished, filed away, completely done. Green means somewhere in process, and white means still to go. And if you look at that, there's not a whole lot that's left on that still to go category. So that's an important thing to take away from this quickly. If we go to the next slide, some construction update photos. So this is Woodneath, and Woodneath is moving along very quickly. Upper left corner, you can see the auditorium coming into shape. The new parking lot, that's the subgrade. Asphalt has not been down. I'm not sure if it's down yet, but it shouldn't be down yet. It wasn't down on Thursday night, I'll put it that way. That you can see along the bottom, this is sort of the connection and the colonnade between the two buildings. And then in the lower right-hand corner is a bollard. That's the most prominent thing in the picture, but the really important thing is to see beyond the pole that's setting there. And what that is, that's the stairway that goes down to the outdoor space, the outdoor, what we're calling an amphitheater. It'll set about 100 people. And this is a good place for outdoor story times and things like that. So this is coming right along. Next slide, please. This is the inside of Woodneath. And I think the real important thing to take away here is that it's all sealed up. With the exception of the sliding glass doors, everything's done to seal up the building, which means the finishes are coming next. In the lower left-hand corner, this is one of the restrooms. You can see the tile work is in place on the wall. If you look, there's where the tile work is. There's a picture that kind of shows a hallway. The next picture shows the stage of the performance space at Woodneath. And so again, now that this is sealed up, this is going to be moving along pretty quickly in terms of the finishes. Next slide, please. This is Green Hills. And Green Hills is like a mushroom, I swear. I mean, we were out there one day and it was all rainy for groundbreaking. And the next thing we know, there's structural steel up and the roof deck's on. So it is moving right along. According to Jim Coulter, our sort of project lead from J.E. Dunn, he says we're a little ahead schedule on Green Hills right now. Assuming that things stay dry, I think we'll still continue to move ahead at a really good pace there. Next slide. This is Lee Summit. And the Lee Summit branch, you might remember, we took a considerable part of the wall to expand out to the north. One of the things I like to point out in this picture, if you look in the lower right-hand corner, you can see that we're building a moat. It's not really a moat. It's just that there's been so much rain that we have had some issues in falling behind a little bit. But but things are continuing to move. Just a little bit behind schedule, but it's just because of the rain that we've been having issues, but otherwise progressing well. I believe that's the last of the construction update pictures. Yes, it is. So next slide, please. Just to reacquaint you with where we are in the project. So last month, that month being September, Green Hills closed, and that's when I finally went to a title company and made Bill Mann sat across a table from me and forced him to sign papers, and Michael knows how tough that can be. But that property is ours and completely ours without any other reservations. And then, of course, we did the North Oak bid on September 14th, and that came back high, and we did the exercise we just walked through. The Woodneath Homestead, we got the certificate of occupancy on the 8th of September, and that is full certificate, which on the 9th of September, staff started moving boxes into the building. So they're actually operating the Story Center now out of the Woodneath Homestead. So next slide. What we did in October, the Blue Ridge substantial completion finished on October 1st. And I was actually out there at the end of last week looking at it. All the carpets down. It's the saddest day for the library because all the shelves are there, but there's no books. And so that's always a sad day for the library. But the books came they started coming the next day. And so Blue Ridge is being commissioned right now. It's ball's completely in our park. And then, of course, the new guaranteed maximum price for North Oak that we just discussed. And so what's on tap for next month is the closing of the North Oak branch on November the 29th. That's when we'll close and we'll start decommissioning that and getting everything moved out. And if I'm not mistaken, we are looking at opening Blue Ridge right about the same time, November 29th. So one door opens, yep, Jake says 11/29. So one door opens and another one closes, I guess, is kind of the way that's gonna work. I think that's the end of the update. Yes, it is.
Just a quick comment. So much work and thought has gone into these particular two projects. And so I'm glad that we were able to kind of move them forward and the list is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And for that, I am eternally grateful. So.
Good job.
Good job. So, new business?
Next up is librarian's report, I believe. So there are two things on the librarian's report, and I believe I've got, my general updates, just 4 things really quick. And then I'll give Katina time to take a drink of water before she gives her quarterly update. So like I said, 4 things that I wanted to report to you. One of them is about the airport, KCI. And so Mid-Continent did participate as a public service, not a vendor. So let me be really clear about what it is. We're not a vendor, we're a public service. On more than one of the KCI airport concessionaire contract proposals. That our participation with the Vantage Group, which was the successful contractor, if you've been, their name's been in the news quite a lot lately. It does include, we were part of that proposal. And so what this does include is a version of service that the San Antonio Public Library unveiled several years ago. So we're kind of building on something that has been happening down at San Antonio for a couple of years now. Our intention is to install a few, and by a few I mean 2 or 4 in that ballpark, Mid-Continent branded charging stations that create a virtual library presence in the airport. The stations will include a large video screen and technology to allow us to loan e-content to travelers. Based on the San Antonio model, we'll work with Overdrive to get short-term, unlimited, simultaneous use copies of things like travel books, juvenile material, or other high-interest but not current bestsellers, along with titles from Woodneath Press. And so that way, if you get to the airport, you forgot to download a travel guide or something, you can download it from us, as well as having the recharging stations. We also have discussed the idea of having a staff available during specific number of high volume travel days to do pop-up story times for travelers on layovers and things like that. Much of this is still developing as Vantage provides us more clarity on how we participate. So, in terms of the cost, that hardware is becoming cheaper every day. Brian Gash has been tracking that for us. It's each unit's in the hundreds of dollars. So, I mean, they're not very expensive. And we'll provide a presence for the library for our customers. As you remember from when they were building the airport, they talked about how so many people who live in the area fly out of the area. And to one of the indictments that some of the people were saying is that that there's not as much commitment, not as much connection with the local community. Well, the local library is going to have a place in there. So we'll continue to keep you posted as we find out more about this and as we get more details. So, story times, wanted to give you an update on story times. As you remember, we piloted outdoor story time presentation, and it's gone much better than expected. By holding the program outdoors, we've been able to have parents and children begin to become accustomed and acculturated to what it means to come to a weekly event. Once again, keep in mind that a lot of the children that are coming to our story time weren't born the last time we had story times. So for lots of times, it's parents and children learning about things for the very, very first time. And it's kind of allowed us to do that. With a lot of our new outdoor spaces that we built at our buildings, it's been great to have programs and kind of allow people to see how this will work in our new outdoor spaces. In addition, it's helped parents and children come together and interact. And so as we move inside, as weather becomes a little cooler, people are used to each other. They know each other. They're more comfortable around each other. And when we move inside, I think things will work out exceptionally well. Grow a Reader. Many of you may recall that Mid-Continent Public Library has an app to help support early literacy skills and early literacy learning. This app was initially created by the Calgary Public Library, and Mid-Continent rebranded it and made some improvements to it, including porting it for Android. And all of that occurred in 2014. In the next few days, we'll be launching version 2.0. It will have new videos, new activities, and even some embedded ebooks into the app, which has been a desired improvement since we launched it in 2014. The new app should be much more engaging for children because the old app really was targeted for adults helping kids learn how to read. This actually will have a little bit more content for children themselves in the app. So very excited about the launching of the new app. It's going to be a soft rollout. Many of you probably haven't actually launched an app before. But you're kind of at the mercy of the Android store and the Apple store. I mean, you put it up there and, they put it up when they feel like it, which can be one day or it can be 4 days. I mean, you never really know. So I'll try to send out an email message when it does become available so you can download it and see it for yourself. Related to Grow a Reader, you might recall that in 2015, we commissioned a book to celebrate the library's 50th anniversary. This is it. Grow a Reader, An Interplanetary Tale. And so we actually, we hand this out to all the time, and it really does focus on some early literacy concepts and it's really a very positive experience. Well, one of the things that we've done is we've returned to our original author and illustrator to help develop a new installment in the series, each book highlighting a different literacy skill. So much more information on the new books and when those will be available and what they look like and what their titles are and all of that will be coming soon. Events and book groups. So recently we did, in fact, I believe I shared with you the photos from the Alexander Donovan Community Service Award at Woodmead. And then the AAUW Thorpe Mean Literary Award luncheon did occur at the Midwest Genealogy Center Community Hall. Both events essentially were private events in the library. I attended both events. I was invited to both events. Each event had about, between 60 to 80 people in them, and both went extremely well. Now, the dynamics of a public event and a private event are obviously very different, but I think this is positive as our community programming department starts putting together the pieces for in-person programs and events. And those are most likely to start in early 2022 as they start working on contracting and getting things together. With that said, our next activity that we hope to bring on board are book discussion groups. And those are going to be coming next month in November. Our intention is try to shift some of the book discussion groups to become self-managed, where Mid-Continent offers the space and materials, but the members of the groups kind of run the program themselves and maintain, but then also maintain a handful of them as staff facilitated. You probably don't know this because you probably never tried to run 75 book discussion groups, but they tend to be very, very labor intensive. And so if we can get some of these to be self-managed it can be very beneficial. And frankly, for a lot of the book discussion groups, they just want a place to meet and they want to play and they want to use our books. And so, so if we can give them that and they can manage themselves, then it can actually be, you know, a significant cost savings for the library. So we're going to be trying that in sometime after November 1st. So those were my general updates. And then the other big update, this being the month after the end of a quarter, is the financial, or I'm sorry, not financial, but the statistical update. And so I believe Katina is on the line, and I believe she's got a PowerPoint just to go over our quarterly statistics.
I am here and I am ready. Can everybody hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for letting me come and talk and take up part of the librarian's report. If we can go to the next slide. As I mention every time I present, the purpose of my presentation here at the board meeting is to, you know, bring us back to where we are related to our strategic plan and our where we are on the data related to our mission fulfillment, right? The core services that we provide as a public library. And so in this current strategic plan, the way that we chose to measure mission fulfillment was through active cardholders, customer satisfaction, and customer transactions. And so those are the three main parts of today's presentation. And so if we go to the next slide, our segue into active customers or active cardholders. And if we go to the next slide, you will see a chart that I've been using to sort of walk you through some of the components of understanding active customers. And so that the first row there is related to, you know, specifically the number of people who have used their library account in the past 12 months. So as of September 30, we had 248,572 people who had, you know, who are active cardholders. And you'll see there right below that our goal for this current strategic plan was to be at 320,000 active cardholders. Now that 248,578 is about 5% more than it was at the end of June, so the last quarter, but it's about 6% less than the same time last year. So, you know, July, August, September of 2020. Another component related to active customers is how many new cards are generated, how many new registrations happen. So this last quarter, again, July, August, September, we had 11,236 card registrations. And that's about 18% more than we had in the last quarter and nearly 30% more than we had this time in 2020. Which makes sense because we had limited numbers of people actually being able to come into our branches and that sort of thing this time last year. So market penetration then just is another step related to active customers. So how many households within our library district actually have an active card within them? That's what market penetration represents. And so right now we are at 37% market penetration. That's 1 point more than it was, again, at the end of June, but about 2 points less than it was this time last year. And then cardholder retention is specific to, you know, after people get through that first year of having a card, how many of them are still active during their second year? So how many customers who registered between October 2019 and September 2020 are still active today in September 2021? So our cardholder retention currently is at 38%. That's 1 point more than it was last quarter and about 1 point less than it was this time last year. And then the final row there relates to the student accounts that we have. There are 17 of our school districts that we have created a memorandum of understanding or an MOU to provide them library cards or library accounts for their students and for some school districts, even for the teachers. And so the numbers that you see there on that last row represent actual numbers of active cards. So currently 63% of the 117,000 student accounts that we have in our libraries, in our ILS, 63%, 63.4% of them have been used within the past 12 months. And that compares to 61% at the end of June, and then 63%, 62.9% this time last year. So if we go to the next slide, a lot of times we want to know how we're doing compared to other libraries. And so this slide gives you, 5 quarters for and comparing our library system to other libraries that use the Savannah platform, and also other libraries in our budget category and other libraries in our population category. So if you look on the left, that relates to our market penetration, right? % of active households. So in the most recent quarter, Q3 of 2021, and that's, the third quarter of calendar year 2021, or the first quarter of our current fiscal year, we're at 37%, which is the number I mentioned on the previous slide. For all libraries that are within that, for all the other libraries that use Savannah, which is, I want to say it's about, the calculation is 150 or so other library systems, their market penetration is at 22%. And then you can see that it's a similar number. It's 21% for those in our budget category, and also 22% in libraries that have a similar legal service area population to ours. And then cardholder retention, again, I mentioned we're at 38% in this Q3 of 2021. And other libraries that use the Savannah platform, the orange bar there, they're at 34% as far as, people who are in their second year of having a card and whether or not they're still active. Okay, so next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about customer satisfaction. If we go to the next slide, this is a reminder. One of the major things that we do to measure customer satisfaction is we email people who've used their card a question that asks, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend that others use Mid-Continent Public Library? And as a reminder, those who rate us 9 or 10 are considered promoters. Anyone who gives a rating of 6 or below are considered detractors. And so the net promoter score is promoters minus detractors. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see here that our baseline when we started the strategic plan in 2018 was 91.8 as our net promoter score baseline, and our goal was to get to 92. At the end of September, our net promoter score was 90.2. And so if I'm looking here, we've had about 3,700 people complete this current round of the net promoter score survey. And of that 3,700, 3,475 were promoters, 88 were detractors. And so that gets us to, if you do the math in your head, that is where we get to 90.2 as our net promoter score. The other way that and I'll point out that word cloud there on the right. The second question on the survey is, please explain your score. So we ask them to give us the score, and then we ask them to explain it. And the larger the words, the more often that they're used in the responses from our customers. And so, to see that friendly, helpful staff, that they love, it's easy to use the library, those large words, those are the types of comments that we're hearing from our customers. And then the last bullet point there on this page, on this slide, relates to the post-program surveys that we offer, to ask people, how would you rate this program? And they ask about the program presenter and whether or not they gained knowledge and whether or not this program has motivated them to, follow, to do this type of programming or participate in this type of programming in the future. And so with that first question, again, 93% of our surveyed customers in the past quarter, which we had 637 program surveys submitted, 594 of them, or 93%, rated that program that they participated in, and we're still providing virtual programs at the end of September. They rated it as very good or excellent. So 93% of our customers, 93% of the people who've been surveyed are, appreciate and enjoy our programming. Next slide, please. So then the third area related to our mission fulfillment is about customer transactions, or people, using library services. So next slide, please. So we set a goal at the beginning of each fiscal year during this strategic plan of what our goal would be for customer transactions. And that just helps us to sort of monitor, see where we're going. And what you'll see here is those first 2 bullet points are related to last fiscal year. Our goal for last fiscal year was to get 9 million transactions. We actually had 9.8 million transactions. And so based on the first 2 quarters of calendar year 2021 compared to where we were in 2019, we set the goal at about 85% of, we're running at about 85%. So we set the goal of 85% of what the goal was that year. So our goal for fiscal 2021, 2022 is 10.6 million transactions. So then the next slide, and I will say that the words that I skipped over there were related to, we set that goal recognizing that Blue Ridge is going to be open, that Lee Summit would be back open, that sort of thing. The Lee Summit branch would be back open. So then let's then sort of run down the transactions for July, August, and September of 2021. You will see that our total transactions for the quarter was 2.9 million transactions. At 2.2 million of those were in circulation, and that's physical and digital items. And that 2,250,381 items circed is about 8.6% higher than the last quarter and 36% higher than this time last year. Okay. Use of virtual resources, that's our online resources, as well as page views of what I call the virtual branch services, like get a card, frequently asked questions, that sort of thing. So we had about 510,000 virtual resource uses, which is down about 4.5% from last quarter and down about 7% from this time last year. And again, this time last year, we were limited on how much people were actually in our branches. And so using us virtually is definitely was happening a lot more this time last year than statement made. Okay. Internet accesses then are related to customers coming in and using our public computers, but also connecting to our Wi-Fi that's offered. And so last quarter, we had 116,065 internet accesses, which is 45% more than it was the last quarter and 75% more than this time last year. So people are back in and using our computers and also having access to the internet, either through our PCs or through our Wi-Fi service. Program attendance, this reflects people participating in virtual programs and also reflects the programs that we're having outside of the library. So if you heard about the KC Symphony program we had at Raytown, when we've got story times being offered over Zoom, that's what's falling into the outreach based programming. And so 5,715 people attended programs last quarter, which is down about 8% from the summertime when we had more programming for a summer library program, but then also it's about 5% less than it was this time last year. And then finally, use of physical resources, significant increases here because we now have our community rooms back open. And so people are reserving those study rooms and, there are some smaller gatherings that are happening in our community rooms. And so that 34,692 is about 25% more than last quarter and, 92% more than the quarter before. That use of physical resources also includes reference questions. So that 92% is really being made up by folks who are actually coming in and using our meeting rooms. So again, 2.9 million items, 2.9 million transactions in this quarter. That's up 7% from the previous quarter and 27% from this time last year. And I will say that just as a side note, as we go to the next slide, September 2021 was the first time we had over 1 million transactions since pre-pandemic, since February of 2020. This was the first month, September was, that we had over 1 million transactions in the month. So this slide just gives you an idea of if we're looking at transactions by quarter. I just mentioned monthly, but this is transactions by quarter from the start of our capital improvements to current. And obviously I should probably change the color of these because I could say that blue one and the darker blue one. You're not sure exactly which one I'm talking about. But so if you look at that July, September grouping there on the leftmost bar represents 2018 and then 2019 and then 2020 and then 2021. So you could see that this last quarter wasn't quite to where we were in 2019, but it's definitely much better and much higher transactions than we had this last quarter. And then my last slide is just a couple of other data points of note from the quarter. As many of you probably know, we had the program that we called Vax in the Stacks. So we had vaccine clinics that we partnered with the local health departments in each of the counties. And so we had 1,167 residents vaccinated at those vaccine clinics that we had last quarter. Food for fines, I just got a number earlier today. That's a placeholder, but we had 10,411 food items received in branches last week for our Food for Fines program. And so this is the first time we've done Food for Fines since 2019, I believe. And so 10,411 items is a really good number. And then just the last point that I'll make is I don't always talk about our door count in this presentation, but I wanted to let you know that we've seen a 37% increase from last quarter in our door counts at our branches. So, and that's my report. I will turn it back over to Steve.
Thank you, Katina. I think that really does sort of indicate various benchmarks and how we've been measuring how we are slowly coming back. So I would entertain any questions.
No questions, and right to the announcements.
Actually, new business, just a couple of items on new business.
Cover then?
No, up to number 7. Yeah, that's 7.1. So just real quickly on 7.1, Missouri Library Association Conference Report. I just want to let you know that I did attend. We did have the Missouri Library Association Conference in St. Louis. It was unusual in that it was small, but there were people there. There were meetings. There were vendors, and it was good to begin to see that the association and the profession is beginning to rebound. But there's really not a whole lot else that I want to say. I mean, we did have some considerable participation by branch managers and other folks. I was able to talk with St. Louis County a little bit about their building program and how that's going. Talk with the state librarian about a number of different initiatives that were going on. But it was a small meeting. Usually they'll be in the neighborhood around 500 attendees for a Missouri Library Association conference, and this was closer to around 250 or so, which is really small for when you're at one of the big cities. So, but like everything else, just slowly coming back. The other new business item is the Missouri Loggers annual report meeting. I know Joycelyn told us that she was not going to be able to attend the entire meeting because she had a family obligation. So she did actually write a little report and put that in board docs. But I know Jennifer is on the line, and I believe she attended the Missouri Loggers meeting. And I'm not sure if there was anything that you wanted to report, Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. This is Jennifer. Are you able to hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Excellent. I think that what I would report, Joycelyn was the employer representative. This slide says that I was elected to be the employer representative. It was actually a tie this year, which was really nice. So Rochelle Farmer attended as the member voting delegate for the library. I attended as a member of the Loggers Legislative Committee of the Loggers Board. Joycelyn's report is really great. I think that her takeaways are excellent. Some of the things that are super important for us about loggers is not just that it's a retirement benefit. It's that we are using the library's money. We are being good stewards of the library's money and supporting that stewardship value by attracting and retaining, well-trained employees. We want to attract them and we want to keep them. If we want to If we want to advance and make progress on our strategic priorities, we want to have good early literacy specialists, and also that we have very good qualified professionals who can manage library resources, oversee them, and make sure that they're being taken care of well. So like Jake and Quan. So it's important that we have a good compensation and benefits program to do that work. We also don't want to spend that money. We want to spend the money wisely. So Loggers is a very well-run retirement system. They are an award-winning retirement system. They are 95.6% funded, which is extremely high for a defined benefit pension plan. Their investment officer has done a fantastic job with increasing the value of the Loggers portfolio, always performing above benchmark. And Brian Collette is one of the top 30 chief investment officers in the United States in terms of public pension plans. But also, it's super important to note that this money that we invest is not just in our staff; it's in our communities. Having a good retirement for members of our communities is an economic stabilizer. And Joycelyn's report is really good at showing how much of those dollars that are paid out in benefits from Loggers, this would be for 2020, those dollars that went to our 3 counties. So the counties that we serve, have in 2020 received $53 million in benefits. So that goes right back into our community. And across the state, 93% of the money that Loggers pays out in benefits stays in the state of Missouri. So those are the things that we always like to look at when we go to Loggers meeting and see. We want to check on how things are doing, how that money is being taken care of, because it's important that we pay attention to that. So that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you, Jennifer. And certainly if there were any questions, we would entertain those. One of the things I learned a long time ago was that you don't want a pension program to be funded at 100%. That's actually overfunding. You want there to be just a little bit under, but you don't want it to be like California or Illinois where it's funded at 10%. And Loggers is doing a really good job. I think the other number that was interesting is you can get this off of Joycelyn, but I'm just doing this from memory. I believe that Loggers statewide had something like I want to say $330 million in benefits, and 300 million of those stayed in the state of Missouri. So although there is this vision that people retire and then they all go to Florida, they don't. people retire and they stay here. And that money gets pumped right back into the local economy. So, great report.
So, do we know if we have any visitors?
We had no visitors, and Teresa, you had no visitor comments that nobody sent anything or?
Got some letters and emails, but I don't actually report.
And do we know who's still maybe with us through Zoom?
Yes, we can tell that.
Right here.
Cody, can you give an update of who's still on the line?
Sometimes the names appear on the
Yeah.
bottom.
Yes, so we've got Lori Lemunyon, Jim Staley, Brian Gash, Diana Ryder, Ellie Garrison, Jake Wimmer, Jennifer Ridley, Katina Jones, Noelle Stepp, Richie Moman, Susan Wilson, and Susan Ray online.
Okay, we still have.
Right.
That's your road. Okay.
In terms of announcements, there were a couple just real quick announcements. So in board docs, you'll see them, but there's a couple things I really want to draw your attention to. November the 7th, Library Lovers VIP event at Lydia's. If you can attend, please contact Diana Ryder or her staff. We'd definitely like for you to attend that if at all possible. The Story Center dedication will be November the 19th up at Woodmead at 4 p.m. Definitely want as many people there, and we want to celebrate. This is, because this is really bringing the sort of the final chapter on that adaptive reuse of the house, which I think is really, really important. Otherwise, please check the check all the events that are in board docs, but those are the ones that I really wanted to make sure that you were aware. So.
Quick comment, I don't anticipate us needing to have a building committee meeting on October 28th because we work really hard.
Correct.
And so several building committee members are in the room or online, but there should be no reason to have one on October 28th based on the actions we took tonight.
Yep.
If there are no visitor comments, trustees' comments. Who goes first? Okay, in that case, I will. Let me just ask, the provisions of our bylaws require that we meet at this day during the month, but it doesn't specify what time. There are some of our trustees have a terrible time crunch in their professions. And unless anybody has an absolute life and death problem with bumping us back to 5 o'clock, please let me know. As we have people who literally cannot leave work and get in their car and be here in 30 seconds, so we have a problem. So anyway, we'll, Teresa, maybe we could send out an email to see if there's any difficulties with other people. Okay. Any other comments or anything else you want to add? I'd just like to pick up from what we talked about earlier. I had gone over the audit report from the Personnel Committee, and I had a number of questions, most of which were answered when we had Gloria and Aaron and Maya. But what I was particularly looking for within notions of diversity, and just notes I had, within areas of what I would have looked for, but I didn't see in this, and again, nothing's cast in stone at all, would be approaching persons by virtue of things we have all the time: age, physique, body dysmorphia, wealth status, education, people who have physical handicaps, people who have issues from dysfunctional families, socioeconomic status that's reflected in, their conduct, and ethnicity, heritage, religious and spiritual practices, mental health, developmental disabilities. I mean, all of these, I think there's a place in the library for all of these people. And I think if we're going to be going in one area, we should go across a broad spectrum of people in our college communities. And another one area, people recovering from addiction, dependency, self-medication. These people, I think especially, are in need of, the old helping hand to come out to them. And this is one of mine that I think if we do anything, I'm only 8.5%, but are felons. I have close friends who are felons who totally paid their duty back to society in terms of incarceration, restitution, and fines. And I think if a person has that background, they are absolute fair target for every kind of overt and actual discrimination one can imagine. So I like, in fact, I very much like the idea of inclusion, but I like this to see a very, very, very broad horizon. And I think some of the 12 or 13 that I mentioned, to me anyway, have equal merit as what Gloria and her crew presented. Because there are incredibly hurting people out there by virtue of stuff they're born into. Bad families and they're illiterate, stupid mistakes in their felons. So I think they're equally deserving. And they're equally, the least among us who I think we can help. So I like the idea of reaching out as a helping hand, but I'd like to have, if I do something, a lot of hands go out to a lot of people. Okay, who's next?
Make some comments. Yeah, I'm a little grieved by the DIE, whatever the acronym is. I don't think anyone here does not want diversity, does not want inclusion, does not want equality. But you know, I just want to encourage all the board members, we need to do some research. The names that on the web, go to the websites, and we need to see what's backing us. Because when you see who's backing it, it is the LGBT, sometimes activists, they want to push an agenda I do not think is appropriate, at least for the county that I represent. So all I can say is that is not, I do not believe that I can only speak for Platte County and the people that put me here, is that the things that I read on the website, especially these councils, what they want to do is not going to help us at all. And when you look at the theory, it puts some people as oppressors, the others as victims. And in these groups, you talk about, you know, how there's ways that you don't even know you've been victimized. We're going to show you these ways. It supports a victim mentality. Myself being a woman, I'm also, I'm Hispanic. So I have Hispanic and a woman. So I have, two things, but just from my vantage point, I don't want to be seen as a victim. I don't want someone to tell me, well, I'm just going to give you this job because you're a woman. Oh, and you have, some Hispanic, better. Okay, no, that would hurt me. I want to be able to, by my own merit, by things that I think that are important to the workforce, be able to prove that I can do the job at hand. So I think we all need to investigate where this is coming from, because when you just hear the words diversity, we all want diversity. We all want inclusion. We all want equality, but we want equality of opportunity. But a lot of this, they're pushing towards equality of outcome, not opportunity, quality of outcome. These ideas are Marxist. They can turn violent. A lot of this stuff is worked against people. It's just causing problems, not causing answers. And a lot of it is just supporting the victim mentality. You don't think you're a victim? By the time you come to our club, you're going to see yourself as a victim, and you're going to look everywhere for things to support that you've been oppressed. And it does not help. It's the name critical is right. It's totally critical. It is totally negative. So I just want to encourage us as a board and a library to support positive things. Okay, we can support the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do to you. We can encourage people that they can be the best person they can be. We don't have to go and look for who is oppressing you, how many people, and just support this kind of mentality, because it does not do any good. It's harmful. It hurts people. And I just want to encourage you guys to take a look at that, because if it just gets glossed over like that, oh, you don't want diversity. Of course we want diversity. Of course we want equality. But we don't want to say, okay, I'm just going to give you the job. Oh, you're a woman, you're Hispanic, you're Black. Okay, then we want to elevate you or because you're too stupid. I don't want that for me. I don't think anybody wants that. So I just want us to encourage us to do things on a positive way and not just look for the negative things that are just going to keep being a self-fulfilling prophecy if we support that.
I think where I am anyway is like if I get I pick up my mail out of the mailbox, okay, I take it and put it on the kitchen table. I might open something or I might not open it. I might read it, I might not read it. If there's a telephone number to call, I might call it, I might not. I'm making no commitments whatsoever. I've just taken it out of the mailbox.
No, and I'm not talking about like today of our vote. I'm talking about just embracing this, the best practices, because the best practices says who? The best practices says a lot of liberal activists that want to push an agenda. That's who's the best practices are coming from. So before we say like, oh yeah, we want to push this on the library, I think we need to look at what it's entailing. So I'm not saying listening to it's fine, But I'm saying we need to really look into it if we want to say, yeah, that's a good, we're going to support this, because the terminology, the words are deceptive.
I got you noted.
Ron, Susan Wilson,
Yeah,
hand is raised.
I have 5 people telling me Susan Wilson's hand is raised.
Oh,
Yes.
Susan, yeah, Susan, you're recognized.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that opinion. I also want to say that I'm a clinical psychologist. I've worked in healthcare. I've worked in diversity and inclusion for 30 years. And I have to say, I'm a little shocked and appalled at some of the reactions to DEI. This is not a new thing. The issue of how do we create a society, how do we create a library that is open and a welcoming place for all is not a new issue. Like I said, the government, the Army was the first. Army was the first in some of these DEI practices and policies. This is not something that someone made up. Actually, it's a discipline that's backed up with research. And if anyone cares to actually research the subject, these are not fly-by-night people offering opinions. These are people that have actually done research on the subject. And I know that everybody has different opinions. And in our society, we have, yes, liberals, and we have moderates, and we have people on the far right. But I think when we're a public organization, we have to understand that our patrons come from all of those groups, and that we have to meet somewhere in the middle. And, but I do encourage board members who don't believe me to really research the subject, because it is not a new subject, and it is not being negative, because you're recognizing that some people in our society have had more opportunity than others. Just like critical race theory that people are talking about is not about rewriting history, it's about telling the history as it really was. And I'm not trying to be divisive or anything like that, but I think it's important.
That's an opinion, sorry. Yeah, that's an
well,
opinion.
that's what everybody,
You're
listen,
welcome.
everybody else has been offering their opinion, so I'm offering mine. So I'm just saying that I do encourage everyone to research this, and you'll find that it has a long history, and it actually, we're kind of behind in really trying to incorporate some of these ideas into the library system. And that's all I have to say, but research it and then come back and let's talk.
Yes, I agree. I agree with that. Research.
Really has the floor.
What caught my attention was that one of the presenters said, their truths may not be your truths. So this is something that who decides whose truths are going to be the truth? And I think that we are skirting this and not saying what the definitive truth is. Is it really that we are open to each other? We have been diverse for many, many years. And now all of a sudden it's becoming somebody's diversity is a different truth from the diversity that somebody else thinks. And we have not defined our terms, and I think until we define our terms, we're walking out a slippery slope.
Good point.
Michelle?
I wasn't going to say anything, but I'll address the elephant in the room. Obviously, people are upset with the comment that I made. I'm just going to tell you, I'm entitled to my opinion. I'm happy to talk to anyone about it. It is what it is. But where I draw the line, and I'm going to say it in a public forum, is that my family has been targeted, my home, my children, to where I have had to hire private security. So if anyone, so I don't really want to hear about acceptance and everything like that. enough. I have been, and Rita have been two of the most targeted people because people didn't like what we said, and Yummy as well, and Michael, I'll just point him out. So if we want to talk about inclusion, that goes both ways. And I've had enough. For 10 years, I volunteered here, and I have busted my tail to take care of employees and do what was right. And it's amazing how that is forgotten. With the Trans 101, I worked extremely hard to do exactly what you just said, and we met in the middle. Quite frankly, no one was happy. So I figured, you know what, neither side was happy. But we were gonna make sure that everybody's voice was heard, and I listened. I took personal time out of my time, took time away from my family, my business, and this is how I'm repaid. By my family being targeted. And I'd love for somebody to explain to me how that's okay and how that's inclusive. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle.
Any other comments? Move that we adjourn? It's moved that we adjourn.
Second.
Second, all in favor, aye.